Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brothers and sisters. As you have seen the title of the video, did Jesus actually prophesy Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the one who would lead astray the very elect, as we see in Matthew, or Jesus was talking about someone else? It is evident that lots of Christians believe that this particular verse in Matthew was talking about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also as we can see in this very post by this guy called Capturing Christianity. I've done a video refuting this guy and his claims regarding the Islamic dilemma or the Muslim dilemma. So he made this claim on X that the Muslims believe that Prophet Muhammad did perform great miracles, so he must be a true prophet. This is our stand, and this is exactly what we believe. So he said, on the other hand, Jesus said, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. This you would see in Matthew. So he, in a nutshell, is saying that this verse is referring to the Prophet ﷺ. So this is their belief. This is a general belief amongst the Christians. But what is shocking is, do the Christians believe that the Prophet ﷺ did actually perform miracles? No Christians. I've not seen any Christian that believe that the Prophet ﷺ did perform any miracle. And if the Prophet ﷺ did not perform any miracle, is the Prophet ﷺ a candidate to this prophecy? I don't think so. And this is why someone immediately commented and said, wait, what miracle? In other words, we don't believe the Prophet ﷺ did perform any miracle. What are you saying, dude? In response to this guy, he said he didn't actually perform any. In other words, we know he did not perform any miracle. Like I said, if he or you believe that he did not perform any miracle, then the Prophet ﷺ obviously is not a candidate, because Jesus categorically said this person would perform great miracles, signs and wonders, if I'm not mistaken. So Muhammad ﷺ is not a candidate. It is we Muslims that believe that the Prophet ﷺ did perform great miracles, but you don't believe that. So if you don't believe that, why would you think that the Prophet ﷺ is the one referred to in this verse? So I immediately come in and made a comment, and I said, when Jesus said that he was referring to Paul, you all missed that. Some got confused and others found what I said funny. However, this video is all about me proving that this prophecy was actually referring to someone called Paul. So in order to understand why I said Paul is the one prophesied by Jesus, let's go to the chapter itself in Matthew chapter 24 verses 23 to 25 and read in context and understand what Jesus was really saying. So in verse 23, Jesus said, at that time, talking to the disciples, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there he is, do not believe it. In other words, when someone comes to you, my disciples, when someone comes to you and say that is Jesus or here is Jesus, do not believe him. This is one of the reasons why we Muslims believe that the disciples never get along with Paul. They never got on the same footing. And this we would see in the letters of Paul. For example, the conflict Paul had with Peter in Antioch, and this we would see in Galatians 2. So you can go and read for yourself. So in verse 24, Jesus continued and said, for false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders that would deceive even the elect, if that were possible. So here we have Jesus saying that this person is a false Christ, is a false prophet. Why will I believe that such person is Paul and not Muhammad? Muhammad claimed to be a prophet, yes. But why Paul? You see, Paul made some bogus claims and the Christians believe. And it's quite unfortunate. One of these claims, we would see it in Galatians 1 verse 12. But in order to get the context, we would have to read a verse before it, which is verse 11. Paul said, for I certify to you, brothers, that the gospel I preached was not devised by man. In other words, it wasn't given to me by man. So in verse 12, I did not receive it from any man, nor was I taught it. Rather, I received it by revelation from Jesus Christ. Paul is telling us that he receives revelation. So when you receive revelation, definitely you don't have to come and tell us you are a prophet. So when we look at the definition of a prophet, one that receives revelations or inspired by God. One might say, but then he's talking about Jesus and we don't believe Jesus is God. Okay, let's go to Galatians chapter 1 verse 1, where Paul said, Paul, an apostle, not from men nor through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father who raised him from the dead. To those Christians who would argue and believe that Jesus raised himself, here we have Paul saying, That's not the case. So that's aside. So Paul came to the disciples. He revealed this to the disciples and the people, but did they actually believe him? What we would see is the disciples were afraid of him. Many disciples had a hard time validating that Paul was a true apostle, that Paul really saw Jesus. Remember the verse? What Jesus said? When someone comes to you and say to you, here is Christ, or there he is, do not believe. So they find it difficult validating that Paul was a true apostle. Like I said in Galatians chapter 2, we would see his conflict with Peter in Antioch. This is just one example. So let's continue. Secondly, in verse 24, Jesus also pointed to something. He said, this man would perform great signs and wonders that would deceive even the elect. Remember, the elect now are talking about the disciples. Number one, Muhammad ﷺ did not make the disciples. So he is not a candidate. Secondly, Christians don't believe that Muhammad ﷺ performed miracles. Again, he is not a candidate to this prophecy. But why Paul? Christians, lots of them, in fact, almost all Christians believe that Paul did miracles. And here we can see for ourselves that Paul did many miracles. These are just few. In fact, he did miracles so much so that he was able to raise the dead. And this is what we see in Acts chapter 29 to 12. So in verse 25, Jesus said, see, I have told you in advance, telling the disciples again, I have warned you in advance. Don't say I did not warn you. And Paul is the only person that have claimed that Jesus has revealed himself to him. None of the disciples made such claim. It's quite unfortunate that Christians, like I said in the comment, they missed this. It's quite unfortunate that they fell for Paul. And this is the reason, one of the reasons why, on the day of judgment, Jesus in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21 to 22, Jesus would say, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. So it's all about the Father. In fact, Jesus said, he is the way, the truth, and the light. No one goes to the Father except through him. The Father is the destination. Jesus is just a conduit. During the time of Moses, Moses was the way. During the time of Muhammad ﷺ was the way. During the time of Noah, Noah was the way. And this is why those that refused to join him in the ark perished. So when we look at the Bible, it's all about the Father, the Father, the Father. So Jesus continued, but only he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Verse 22, many will say to me on that day, and this is important, please take note of this. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? In other words, these people are not Muslims because we don't prophesy in the name of Jesus. These people definitely are not Muslims. They would go to Jesus and say to him, didn't we prophesy in your name? And your name drive out demons and perform many miracles. Remember, Paul did perform many miracles in the name of Jesus. So in verse 23, Jesus said, then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. Why did Jesus say lawlessness? Why is this word important here? Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 5 verse 18. But again, in context, we'll be reading the verse before. Jesus said, do not think that I have come to abolish the law of the prophets. Do not think, don't even imagine. I have not come to abolish them but to fulfill them. In verse 18 he said, for I tell you truly, until heaven and earth pass away, underline this, until heaven and earth passes away, not a single jot, not a stroke of a pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Jesus continued in verse 19, and again this is very important. So then, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments, that's the law Jesus will be talking about in Matthew 7. So Jesus continued, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do likewise will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. Subhanallah. Is this not obvious to the Christians? Can the Christians see this? Don't the Christians read their Bible? You have fallen victim, and you would go and stand in front of Jesus on that day, and Jesus would deny you, despite prophesying in his name, despite casting out demons in his name. He would deny you because you are a people of lawlessness. So Jesus continued, but whoever practices and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So now, why would Jesus consider these people as a people of lawlessness? It is simple, because Paul, the apostle, the acclaimed apostle, trust me bro, I saw Jesus, trust me, no evidence. He said in Ephesians 2 verse 15, again in context we'll be reading from 14. He said, for he himself is our peace, who has made the two one and has torn down the dividing wall of hostility. Verse 15, by abolishing in his flesh the law of commandments and decrees, he did this to create in himself one new man out of the two, thus making peace. So Jesus abolishes the commandment according to Paul. Don't get me wrong, Paul did not say people shouldn't uphold the commandment, but then he said the commandment is not binding on the Gentiles. And again, this is one of the reasons why he had problems with the disciples. I saw a commentary online try to explain or find a way out of this by saying the word translated as abolish here is the Greek word katargesas. This literally means to render inoperative or to remove all power from. Paul's intent is to say that the purpose of the law had been completed, so the Gentiles don't have to apply the law to themselves. They are now on a new covenant. This is what Paul said. So when the Gentiles come to Jesus on the day of judgment, Jesus would deny them. They are a people of lawlessness. Now you can see the reasons why I said Jesus was prophesying Paul, but the Christians missed this. Christians, if you're watching this, please wake up. Wake up from your slumber. The truth is clear. It is you that have chosen not to be guided. Do not let people read for you. Take the Bible, read for yourself. Take the Quran, read for yourselves. Ask questions. Do not be scared of asking questions. And inshallah, Allah would guide you. So with this I say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I remain your brother Abdul. Catch you in the next one.